Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Attack the Baseline, a WNBA podcast where every episode we attack our baseline knowledge of the WNBA. The 2024 regular season has wrapped up, 40 games up, 40 games down, and we are geared up for our first playoffs as a podcast. Exciting things on the horizon, but first, Kristen, how are we doing today?
Doing great. I'm so excited for the playoffs. I think these matchups are going to be honestly very good, very exciting. It came very fast. The season was so quick, I thought, and now we're here. We wrapped up the regular season last night with the Atlanta Dream making it into the 8th seed.
Yes.
Even yesterday, it could have been the Mystics.
Yeah, Washington beating Indiana would have forced the tiebreaker. They would have had it over Atlanta, but Atlanta needed to win against New York, who, halfway through the game said, we're okay playing Atlanta. But still, it was right down to the wire.
Yeah, really, really good. So even like the last games of the season were really impactful. So I'm great. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great ride. If this is your first time listening to Attack the Baseline, welcome. Very happy to have you. Love to bring in new and old fans of the W. But again, every week we're trying to learn a little bit more about the league and become, as knowledgeable of fans as we're able to be. If you'd like to reach out to us and let us know how you feel about the show or about a particular team or a particular player, you can send us an email at attackthebaseline@gmail.com or connect with us on our Twitter at @ATBpod_. Okay, so do you want to put a bow on the regular season before we get into these 4 first-round matchups? There were a couple things that happened, outside of the games that happened last night. A couple, notable milestones, I would say.
Sure. So as we heard last time, A'ja Wilson set the first ever 1,000 point season.
Awesome.
She finished with 1,021 points. Didn't play in the last game. So could have been more than that.
Could have been.
But really amazing for her. She also finished the year with the most rebounds in a season, passing Angel Reese's record that she previously set in this year.
Which, hey.
So that's cool.
It's impressive. It's
Yeah.
very and led the league in blocks too.
Yep.
Yeah. So big year for A'ja, and she will be, not to tip the hand too much on awards, which we'll get into near the end of this show. Unanimous MVP incoming for A'ja, which would be her 3rd MVP or 2nd MVP.
Her 3rd, I believe.
That's pretty good. So 3.
Okay. And then we also have my girl, Tina Charles.
Yes.
Who, midway through the season, we weren't sure if she was going to get to first all-time rebounds. But she did pass Sylvia Fowles this week in all-time rebounds, 4,007.
That was the mark she needed.
Yeah.
A couple more.
Yep. And she is just going to keep going.
Yeah.
And then she also, a couple days ago, we were like, well, she might meet the all-time double-double record. Well, she beat the all-time double-double record. And now she has 194, also passing Sylvia Fowles.
And is anybody closer on that? Yeah, it's like NECA, who
90 less.
90 less.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
A'ja.
John Quell is 90.
Yeah.
And Stewie.
So yeah, I mean, some of these younger players I expect to, surpass. But
Right.
for now, really great for Tina.
I absolutely agree. And, we don't know where Tina Charles is going to end up next year, just like we don't know about a lot of players. But we do know that Tina Charles will get an opportunity to play in the playoffs as the Atlanta Dream take on the New York Liberty. So let's start from the top. The 1-8 matchup. For those of you that don't know about the format, the first round of the WNBA playoffs is a best of 3, where the home team gets the first 2, and then if a third game is forced, the lower seed gets the home court advantage for the tie-breaking game, which is a very interesting format. If you're interested in hearing a take that we had about this, we were invited onto the 32 Fans podcast, if you want to find that. It was a patron episode, but we got a little bit into this format and whether or not we think it's good or bad for the league, and maybe it's just a product of the way the place that the league is right now, and maybe when they have more teams, they'll increase these numbers of games to 5 or maybe to 7 in some of the later rounds. But right now it's 3, 5, and 5 for the different various rounds of the playoffs. So looking at this matchup between New York and Atlanta, New York will get the first 2 games at home. New York, the number 1 seed team, basically the entire way all season. Atlanta, a team that, like we said, barely made the postseason, but a team that we just covered recently. So, broad thoughts. What do we think about this match?
It's just so funny that the Dream even made it in because, when I look through the stats, team stats, they're frequently at the bottom. And a lot of times, like, the Dallas Wings or the Washington Mystics are, like, much higher in certain statistics than the Dream are. So it's just, like, crazy that they ended up here.
Right.
But as we talked about in our episode last week about the Dream, it's just really led by these 3 women, Tina Charles, Alicia Gray, and Ryan Howard. And they're going to have to carry the team on their back.
Correct.
And competing with the very deep Liberty team, I don't necessarily think that they will be able to keep up. I have mentioned before how I believe the Liberty can play down. I would not be surprised if this first game could get a little dicey.
A little shaky.
Yeah. But ultimately, I think this matchup, at least, I feel confident in saying I think the Liberty will win.
Okay. Well, and just like comparing the rosters, you mentioned those 3, and then you look at the New York side. Let's look at their 3, which Stewie, Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, 3 of statistically the top 10 players in the W this year, according to herhoopstats.com. Like, all very positive win share players. There's not an Atlanta player that cracks that top 10 list. So really, it's like 3 players that are a tier or maybe 2 tiers above the 3 Atlanta players. I agree with you that I would be pretty shocked if New York drops a game here, and it would be a bad sign for their playoff hopes in later rounds. But I expect them to take care of business as well. I think this is going to be a pretty easy 2-game series for New York, which will maybe set up for a much more difficult second round matchup. But we'll get into that later as we build out our bracket here. So we think New York. Anything else to say about New York or Atlanta?
Not right now. In the later rounds, we can say more.
Now, I hope that Alicia and Tina and Ryan have a good playoffs. We mentioned a couple weeks ago that they are definitely gassed from the amount of minutes that they've played. Some of them playing 40 minutes a game in certain cases. But yeah, it's still. I'm still positive that Atlanta made it. I like that. Alicia Gray, one of my faves. All that aura. And Ryan Howard the other night had the specs on because she had an eye injury. When Ryan Howard has the glasses on, plus Alicia Gray having the glasses on when they stand next to each other, that's just like 10 times the aura in one. Infinite aura. So maybe that can win them the day.
Oh, maybe.
But moving on.
Okay.
The 2-7. We've got the Minnesota Lynx, the de facto surprise team of the W this season, versus the Phoenix Mercury, a team that has BG and Diana Taurasi and Kalia Copper, a team that probably underperformed what they were hoping going into the season. But how do we think things figure for a very hot Minnesota team versus a Phoenix team that has struggled at times?
Yeah, Minnesota is definitely hot coming into this postseason. They've won 7 games in a row. I don't know about the last game. And they've won, I think, 9 of their last 10 games. So they are the hottest team coming into the playoffs.
Yeah.
But they, for sure, no one expected this to happen for them. I was looking back at rankings before the season started, what people thought would happen. And everyone I saw had the Lynx really in the bottom 4. So this is just like incredibly exceeding expectations for the Lynx, but they've been doing it all year. So at this point, I think you can count on them to not totally drop the ball in this postseason. The Lynx, I think, are much better at three-point shooting in general. They have a very deep three-point shooting roster.
Sure.
We've seen Sophie Cunningham, we've seen Rebecca Allen, and Kalia Copper get hot from 3.
DT can get hot too.
Right, they could. So it's definitely a possibility that could happen. But I do think, at least in the paint, I think Nafisa will best BG. So at least right there, I would take the Lynx in that player matchup.
Sure. Well, you said they've been an incredibly well-coached team all year. They play the best team basketball of any team in the league, leading the league in assists, incredibly talented from beyond the arc, multiple 40% three-point shooters, a bench that has multiple options from defensive or offensive perspective. Courtney Williams, a player that I've heard from this year that she struggled to figure out what it meant to be like a true point guard, but she's become an incredible passer, averaging 5.5 assists per game. Players like Kayla McBride, who's the number 2 to Fee's number 1, can shoot it and can also is a sneaky good passer. And they're so coherent defensively that yes, it's worth it to say that Phoenix could get hot, but I believe in the Lynx' ability to get out and guard the 3 and sort of trap them. I know Phoenix is a modern offense. They shoot a good volume of 3. They actually might shoot more 3s than Minnesota in a game. You think? In terms of volume, in terms of attempts, because I think they're top 2, maybe top 3 in terms of attempts, and Minnesota makes more. They have a higher percentage, but I think they shoot a few less. But I think my biggest thing about the series is that I think Kalia Copper, who Philadelphia native, we love Kalia Copper, could be the best scorer in the series. Yeah, could be the best scorer in the series. However, Nafisa Collier is probably the best defender in the league. So, yeah, Nafisa is going to have her hands full with BG, but Nafisa can guard every position. So if she needs to, if Ka is getting hot, Nafisa can get on her and force tough jumpers that won't go in and make it, hell. And then you can just pass the defensive assignment over to Alana or to Bridget, or Courtney Williams can, get and guard DT and prevent, an open 3. Like, I don't think that the odds are great that Phoenix forces a game 3. Wouldn't be shocked, but do believe in Minnesota being as legit as they seem to be numbers-wise.
Well, what if Diana Taurasi knows this is her last season. Is she trying extra hard?
I mean, why wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. We don't know
No.
if she's retiring. It hasn't been announced.
Gut check.
Yeah.
Gut check from you. What do you think?
No, I don't think she's retiring.
I also don't think she's going to retire.
They're just looking for media attention.
I don't even think it's that. I think it's just like, how are you not retiring considering where you are, 5 years older than the next player in the W, but like, she's still good. Mm-hmm. Still playing 30 minutes a game, scoring 15 points.
Right.
Like, can still pass. Mm-hmm. If she was willing to come off the bench and like, I think then Phoenix would buy into it. Mm-hmm. Like, you're fine. You can stay and play again. Be like a 15-minute a game, extra distributor. Mm-hmm. But, she's such an iconic player. Mm-hmm. She's the leading scorer in WNBA history. Mm-hmm. She's multiple-time champion. What does the league look like without her? It's kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. So then, at the end of the day, Minnesota or Phoenix?
I believe Minnesota in 2, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. I think Minnesota takes care of business at home.
Yeah.
So now let's look at the big one. This is probably the de facto. This is the third time I said de facto. I gotta cool it. Oh. This is probably what people would consider the best series in the first round. A very hot Indiana Fever team since the break. They've been, well over 6 seed talent, taking on a Connecticut Sun team at the 3 seed. Connecticut gets 2 at home. Indiana could force a game 3 and have home court advantage in a pivotal moment. Is this the moment for Indiana, a team whose starting 5 has 0 playoff experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this really is like such an interesting matchup of what will ultimately win the day, the best offense or the best defense.
Yeah.
Looking in the last 15 games for playoff teams, Indiana is number 1 in offensive rating. Mm-hmm. And the Sun are 7th of the 8 playoff teams. Mm-hmm. So top versus mostly bottom.
Yes.
In defensive rating, the Sun are 2nd in the 8 playoff teams in defense. And the Fever are last. So it's just, will the Sun's defense be able to stop them? Or will the Fever's offense be too much for the defense to handle?
Right.
I don't know. I think it will be very tight. I think this will go to 3 games, which is just kind of weird that going to 3 games then gives advantage to Fever because that's their home.
Right.
But I think we need to talk about experience level.
Mm-hmm. That's important.
Obviously, the Sun have played together longer and they're older, more experienced veteran players.
Yes.
Versus the Fever being very young.
Right.
And then I think you need to think about like size overall.
Sure.
And the Sun, I think, are bigger players in general. Than,
at least their starting 5 is skews a little bit bigger.
Yeah, than the Fever. So the defense may have some advantage in, being a bigger size. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like Caitlin is so fast. Mm-hmm. Maybe it comes down to Dejanay versus Caitlin.
I think I was gonna say that. I think that is the true one-on-one matchup to watch.
Yep.
Like, can Dejanay hold her even to, let's say, 70% of her top ability? It's a tough ask. It's a really tough ask. Caitlin is already the best passer in the league, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So if Caitlin is able to find open looks for her teammates, then it doesn't really matter how well she's guarded by Dejanay. Caitlin can choose to not be the primary scorer. She can say,
Right.
I want Kelsey to be the primary scorer.
Yep.
And take her hands off and just make the right pass, get away and find the mismatch, and beat on them. You nailed that. That is the matchup.
Yeah. It's just the fast break points, especially where Caitlin's bolting up the floor. Will Dejanay be able to catch her and, block her?
have to
And
see.
Dejanay's been good at blocking at the rim when she has to. So we'll see.
Yeah, the Sun are 3-1 this season against the Fever. Something to note. Regular season is different than playoffs. You talked about the defense versus the offense. We know Connecticut doesn't shoot a lot of threes. They brought Marina Mabry in mid-season to bolster some of that three-point shooting. Didn't necessarily pan out exactly.
Well,
still
we'll
a question
see.
mark.
And during the regular season, I don't think it matters.
No, she's still a 42% three-point shooter.
Now is when we'll see if Marina maybe paid off.
That's true. Like if Marina wins them a game, then it will be worth it.
Yeah.
I think. Like if she knocks down 5 threes in a game, then your trade was worth it. We've talked about this in the past with, friend of the pod, Coach, our Connecticut Sun fan, who now that there's a Portland team, maybe he won't be a Connecticut Sun fan anymore. We'll see.
Let us know.
We'll have to we'll talk to you. If Connecticut is able to control the pace of the game, which will be difficult considering the speed of Indiana, then they can win this series. If Indiana takes the reins and gets out to an early lead, I think it's difficult for Connecticut to come back. If Connecticut starts hot, which is possible, then they can dictate. AT is a maestro, also an incredible passer, and a bully in the paint. It is very possible that Connecticut slows Indiana down to the point where they're, running out shot clock and hoisting, more ill-advised shots than better shots. It's truly going to be a slugfest.
Yeah.
And I think we're split on this one.
Yeah, I will take the Fever in 3.
And even last night, I changed my mind. I had Fever in 3 as well. Kelsey Mitchell rolled her ankle in a game that didn't matter. Not an injury that is too scary, they said. Shouldn't affect her. She should be playing. Kelsey Mitchell, if you lose even, 30% of her being one of the best scorers since the league came back from the break, that is meaningful. That's very meaningful. I might be making a mountain out of a molehill, but something in my gut is telling me that Connecticut is going to take care of business here, even if it means going to Indiana. I'll take Connecticut in 3 and go with the chalk so far.
Okay, that's fine.
So we got one more first round matchup.
Yeah.
The Las Vegas Aces, the returning back-to-back champions in the 4 spot here, taking on the Seattle Storm, who are a team full of players who have very little experience playing with each other outside of these 40 games. So what's the look in this series?
I think this will be a really good series as well. The two teams actually just played each other a couple days ago for home court advantage.
Sure.
So it was a big game, even though it was one of the last ones. And the Aces ended up winning. Of course, Ezzy Magabagor and Jewel Lloyd were not playing. So not necessarily exactly what you're going to see in this series. This is also kind of a situation where Seattle's defense is really good. They are top in blocks by Ezzy and steals by Skylar Diggins-Smith.
Yeah.
She's going to be a menace. Versus the Aces offense, which has been great as of late. They've been playing much better recently than they had at the beginning of the season. So this is going to be a really interesting series as well.
Yeah.
In my mind, even though Seattle has really good defense, I think Chelsea Gray's passing and Asia's rim offense will be able to overcome that. Mm-hmm. And I think the Aces could pull it out. But if Jewel Lloyd gets really hot, who has good postseason experience, then it could swing in Seattle's favor.
Yeah, I'm going to be watching the Storm. Their Coach Quinn's ability to manage Jewel if she goes through a tough shooting night. Just looking at Jewel's stats from the season, not a good 3-point shooter.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely a rough year behind the arc.
Took a step back for Jewel.
Something that they could use would be 3-point shooting, but they're one of the middle to lower teams in terms of attempts. They prefer to, get their damage done in the paint, which is possible against the Aces, who are, not a top flight defense in the league right now as far as defensive rating is concerned. But if Jewel, like you said, can get hot, then that could be huge. Is he going to be able to guard Asia? That's a question. What can Gabby Williams from the French national team, what can she bring, having just returned to Seattle where she had previously played?
Mm-hmm. She was great in the Olympics.
And she's been very good for them since joining the team, like a double-digit scorer that they just didn't have. Gives them some different looks. I also would want to highlight a player like Jordan Horston, who has been in and out of the starting lineup for Seattle, a player that is very talented at guarding not only like smaller guards, but she can guard up. I think if she could cause a tough shooting night for someone like Kelsey Plum, who the other night was just out of her mind, like that could be a difference maker. If all of the load goes on to Asia, she's able to bear that most of the time. But sometimes it's tough to ignore that this Seattle team can also, put on a show offensively, even if they're a little bit on the slower side.
Okay, so who you got?
Before I had Aces in 2, I'm going to switch to Aces in 3 on this series.
Okay, I also think Aces in 3.
Aces in 3. Mm-hmm. So that means, looking at our bracket, we would have New York versus Vegas, a rematch of last year's final, and then Minnesota versus, you say Indiana, I say Connecticut. Why don't we start with that one?
Okay.
I'll go with you. Let's say that Indiana and Caitlin make it through versus Minnesota, because
Connecticut.
No. Let's say that. Let's say that
you.
Indiana ends up facing Minnesota in the second round, because I think Minnesota versus Connecticut is a little less interesting to me than Indiana versus Minnesota. But what do you foresee about the Lynx taking on this hotshot fast offense?
Well, this will just be offense versus offense situation. This past year, throughout the season, Minnesota has been 2-1 versus Indiana. So Indiana's given them, a little bit of pushback. And they really, since the break in the last 15 games, the Fever and the Lynx are 1-2 in offensive rating. So I know this would be a really good offensive game. However, if you look at the defense, as we already said, the Fevers is last with these 8 teams, but the Lynx are third. So I do think that while offensively it will be really interesting, Caitlin and Kelsey Mitchell and Lexi Hall versus Kayla McBride, Alana Smith, Bridget Carlton, all trying to shoot threes. I do think Nafisa and all the other defensive pieces will be able to be better defensively than the Fever. So I think the Lynx will be able to slow them down a little bit.
Yeah, I look at the Nalissa Smith, Aaliyah Boston combo in the paint. That Indiana has some solid size. It's important to note that Minnesota traded for Maisha Hines-Allen, who has given them a little extra size.
Yep.
They're I feel like they're a taller team or a longer team, but they don't have like a ton of size, but they're able to bolster that with a player like Maisha. And I think she could be a very valuable piece in a series like that, because you're probably going to want to go send 2 players to cover Caitlin. And, if you can force turnovers against Indiana and make your shots, then you shouldn't have as tough of a time, because their defense is so solid that I think they'll have an easier time stifling Indiana, or in the other sense, if Indiana gets out to an early lead, have the ability to catch up because they can knock down open shots from beyond the arc.
Yeah.
Or Courtney Williams can just go beast mode
and
sink infinite long twos that are worth less points but still look pretty cool.
Doesn't matter if you can do it.
It does not matter if you can do it.
Well, what if it was Connecticut?
Well, I think that I would think I'd be more concerned about Connecticut. Like, Minnesota can dictate. They can play slow. They're also a slower paced team. So, like, the advantage that Connecticut has of, I'm going to, turn the speed down to 75%. I don't think that really affects Minnesota as much as it might affect Indiana in the first round. So I think that their ability to play through different speeds is, sort of takes that advantage away from Connecticut. I'm not denying that it would be a good series.
Yeah.
But I do kind of feel the same way in both cases, whether it's Indiana or Connecticut, that Minnesota will come out of this 5-game series in the 4 games.
Okay.
That's
I agree.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. Okay.
So New York and Vegas.
Okay.
The big one.
Yes.
People say it's a shame that we're not getting this as a rematch for the final. I think it's awesome that we get this earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So that we can get a different matchup for I always prefer new matchups for the finals.
Oh, for sure. I totally agree. I think it would still be exciting, but I think it's, played out narrative having the same in the finals.
Yeah.
So I like having it this way, how the standings played out. Well, this year, New York is 3-0 versus Las Vegas.
Yeah. Haven't been, I don't think, you'll have to maybe remind me if you know. I don't think there've been like two particularly close. Like, a lot of the games have been
I don't remember.
Decent win margins for New York, I'm pretty sure. Hasn't had the same, like, must-see action attention as maybe we expected going into the season. But yeah, New York has kind of owned Vegas this year, but of course, the Chelsea Gray factor of it all in early games this year, they didn't have her, and she adds a different dimension to the team. She is their point guard. So
Totally.
So what do you see? Asia versus Stewie, Jonquel versus any of the bigger assignments,
Kia Stokes or Megan Gustafson,
or both. They might throw different looks. Jackie Young Kelsey Plum versus Sabrina.
Yeah.
Jackie Young versus Benijah.
Yeah.
I suppose.
It's just like
Leonie
wild
Phoebish.
how similarly the teams match up. Like
They're both super teams.
Yeah, well, yeah. I was looking earlier. Like, Kelsey Plum has made more threes in the last 15 games, I'm pretty sure, than Sabrina. But Sabrina has a better percentage of threes. So it's like, they're so close. Who is ultimately going to win the series? I believe that I believe that Asia is playing better than last year.
Yes.
Stewie is playing worse than last year.
Probably not by much.
Not much worse. And lately, she's been better. Not that she was bad, but I think last year she was the league MVP. This year, she's not.
Right.
And Asia's going to be.
Right.
So that is something to think about. I do think Sabrina can... You're not necessarily... I don't know. I think that Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, who's been, I think, very hot from 3 lately, not just passing. She's not afraid to shoot either. They can keep up with Sabrina and Kayla Thornton and whoever else is shooting threes.
Sure.
From New York.
Sure.
Obviously, the home court advantage goes to the Liberty, and they have more to play for, I'd say. They've been very hungry. They've never won a championship. They lost last year to the Aces.
Yep.
But the Aces have this sort of chip on their shoulder, too, right now because of the lawsuits and whatever. So I kind of feel like momentum is in the Aces' court.
Okay.
Everything around Asia. She's been breaking every record. She's
Yeah.
first in everything. They've had so much hype around them lately.
She's wearing Minecraft fits on the sideline.
Amazing. And I think the Aces are playing so much better
Yeah.
than they were at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
Stay tuned for our Aces coverage because we were Aces fans this week.
Yeah.
And it was just like beautiful to my brain
Yes.
to watch them after watching, these bottom teams for the past 4 weeks.
Correct.
So I was like amazed watching the Aces. Maybe I was
It's
just
not like we've never watched the Aces
disillusioned.
before that, but
yeah. But I feel like momentum is swinging towards the Aces for right now, towards the end of the season. And I will pick, but I think this is going to 5 no matter what.
Yeah.
I will pick Aces in 5.
I think if New York loses the first game, then there's then it's going to be tough. I think New York needs to win game 1 and get out on the right foot here. I also think it's important that they get open looks, that they are able to take advantage of some of the defensive flaws that Vegas has. Maybe go try to pick on Kelsey Plum a little bit or Jackie Young because because you have more size than them. Courtney Vandersloot, a player that we haven't mentioned really, like her plus Sabrina gives you 2 passers that are able to find those looks that they're going to need to take advantage. And New York really doesn't have a flaw. Like they're effectively top 3 at least in every single stat. Like their pace is good, their scoring is good, their passing is good, their ability to defend, to steal the ball, block the ball is good. But maybe their field goal percentage is down in the last 15 games, but
That's the momentum.
I get it. Kristen's like pointing to her screen, trying to, defraud me. But I just think that New York's been good all year, and they know how to play together. And Jonquel Jones,
I know. I can't disparage Jonquel Jones.
so good.
She's
I know,
good.
I'm like saying like she's the best player on their team, but she's a player that, like, if Asia gets distracted, Jonquel Jones could be the very reason that New York gets by Vegas.
Yeah.
I am picking New York
Okay.
in 5 games.
Okay.
You are picking Vegas in 5 games.
Correct.
And what does that mean for the final? against this Minnesota Lynx team.
We either have a Commissioner's Cup repeat of Liberty Lynx. Boring, I think.
But it's a 5-game series.
Still, we've seen it.
No.
Or we have the Aces Lynx.
Versus the Lynx. Which could be exciting. Your perspective on Aces Lynx? I
think either way, whoever comes out of this left side, the Liberty or the Aces, their path has been much harder than the Lynx has.
Sure.
I think basically all these series are going in the full time. So they're going to be potentially beat down.
Sure.
And the Lynx are going to have had an easier time getting here, I think. So advantage Lynx in that sense. I think the defenses are very comparable. The offenses are pretty comparable.
Sure. Well, Vegas is a little worse in defense.
Sure.
That could be the answer.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, the thing I worry about when Minnesota plays either New York or Vegas, either way, I think that Minnesota, it's tougher for Minnesota to have a player that drops 30 plus. Nafisa Collier is averaging more than 20 points per game, but she gets the bulk of her money defensively. And she has, I don't know for sure how many 30-point games she's had this season, but I believe that Kelsey or Asia or Jackie could have a 30-point game any given night. I believe that Stewie, Sabrina, Jonquel could drop 30 on a given night. I don't feel that way about anybody on Minnesota outside of maybe Kayla McBride.
Okay.
Given if she's given the opportunity to shoot like 10 threes, and they might not want to do that.
So like on the Liberty Aces side, it's going to be, this was the Asia game, this was the Kelsey Plum game, whatever. This was the Sabrina game. It has to be more of a team effort.
Which they are the best team basketball team in the league.
Yeah.
They need to distribute the ball and have double-digit scoring from 4 or 5 players to keep up with what likely one player will be able to do, or they will attempt to do, at least on New York or Vegas.
Yeah.
I think that's the story for me, if it comes down to that.
As we saw in the Commissioner Cup, especially if this is a rematch between Liberty and Lynx. The Lynx won that game. Obviously, that was only one game. Much more can happen in a 5-game series. But to me, I do put a lot of emphasis on the team showing, the Lynx proving that they can win in these high-pressure championship situations. They know how to beat New York in a championship game. They did it already.
Yeah. A single game.
I'm just saying, if it comes down to 5, you have 1 game left. They were in New York. They're away.
Right.
There you go.
And then New York went to Minnesota and beat them in the next game.
Well, I'm just saying, that was regular season. You take your foot off a little bit.
You're right. So who do you have winning
I'm
the whole thing?
I will choose the Lynx to win.
The dark horse, who we foretold week 5. Go back and listen to the Lynx pod. See how right we were about stuff. I am going to take New York to win their first WNBA title. This feels kind of like the year.
I will be very happy for them if that happens.
Yes, we're Philadelphians. It's tough to, put that rooting interest behind New York. Kristen has family in New York.
We could go to the parade.
We could
if
go
it's
to
on
the
a
parade.
convenient day.
That's true. Sometime in October. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I am disconnected enough from, the Liberty being, the same as all the other New York teams that I would be excited for Stewie, and excited for Jonquel, and excited for everybody else on that New York team. We're split.
There you go.
There you go. That's how we feel about the WNBA playoffs. They start on Sunday. You're probably listening to this on Saturday or even Sunday, and there's games on right now.
Gear up.
Check the schedule. The schedule's all the way out. So that's exciting.
Looking forward.
Yes.
We perhaps didn't plan this very well.
No.
We are going on a vacation.
Correct.
During the end of round 2, beginning of round 3.
Yes. Which is a shame. We didn't know when the finals were going to be when we booked this vacation.
Yeah. So,
However,
we'll be back.
We will.
Whenever we can.
Yes. And it may be sporadic. It may be reacting to a single game because we saw something very interesting.
Right.
Or just the result of a series.
Yeah.
We're going to try to be still very active in the playoffs, but there might be a window where you're missing us for a little bit of coverage. But we will be back to cover the results of the final in a very meaningful time. But we're not done here. We're not done here. League awards.
Yep.
There are a couple awards to think about. It's not a particularly long list. They don't have some of like the clutch player of the year. They don't do second or third team all W. I don't think they do all defensive team either. I was trying to find that, but let's go through some of these. It's kind of a chalky year, but there are a couple contentious ones. MVP, who you have anybody other than Asia?
No,
We've already talked about that.
They ESPN already said we unanimously voted for Asia.
I think they have 3 votes, but I don't know how many total voters there are.
Yeah.
Defensive player of the year. We mentioned it in this pod.
I don't think that's locked up.
I think it's locked up.
Why? Nafisa?
Nafisa Collier is the anchor of the best defense in the WNBA.
Well, apparently the best defense is the Sun.
In the last 15 games?
No. The Liberty have been the best in the last 15 games. So maybe it's Alyssa Thomas.
Hashtag not my stats. Hashtag not my stats.
Okay.
No, AT could be. Could be.
Yep.
She's the Connecticut anchor.
Could be Asia.
I don't think it's going to be Asia.
They want to spread it out.
Correct. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. But she's, a defensive player of the year talent, obviously.
Okay.
Let's go to coach of the year. I think this one's pretty locked. There's one team that vastly outperformed where everyone thought they were going to be, and it's not Indiana.
Yeah.
Cheryl Reeve, our Olympic winning coach for Minnesota.
And that too. That's a great little bit of it.
Yeah, she doesn't get a medal.
Right. Oh, give her a trophy.
Give her a trophy.
Whatever
give her an
they
award.
get.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Give her a car. I don't know.
Oh.
Give her a vacation. Yeah, she's gonna need it. But I do think Christy Sides has been through a lot this year, and there were times where people were asking for her to get yeeted, and that wasn't the case.
Yep.
They overreacted. But Cheryl Reeve, go enjoy.
Great.
Coach of the year.
Okay.
So let's do 6th woman of the year.
Okay.
So first off the bench, if you want to look at the top teams, I think this could be a Minnesota player. I don't know who is there first off. It's not Natisha Heineman is not of the caliber of Leonie Fiebisch, who has been 6th person on New York. New York's the number 1 team. Fiebisch is a 43% three-point shooter. She's a rookie. She's surprised. But she's been very, very good for a New York team that's just needed, whenever they need to spell one of their aces or one of their best players, they can count on a player like Leonie to take the position. So I would say Leonie Fiebisch, but is there an aces player?
Yeah, I've heard Tiffany Hayes' name, who's on the Aces, who I didn't really know much about her at all before
this week. Yeah.
when we started watching. But it seems like she's been, very dependable, shooting 50% field goal. I think she's been really good.
Yeah, I mean, but from what I've seen, she wouldn't be...
I don't have so many stats prepared about Tiffany Hayes.
Right.
But I've seen her name been brought up a lot.
Right. Yeah, but I don't think there's a player on Seattle. I don't think there's a player on Connecticut that I feel like it could be like... I want to say that Dejanay won this award, but Dejanay started every single game this year for the Sun, 39 out of 40. So I to me, it's like pretty clearly you either go with the best team in New York and just give it to Phoebish, or you consider a player like Tiffany Hayes who helped the Aces when maybe they didn't have a Chelsea Gray hanging around.
Well, we didn't mention Rookie of the Year.
True, Rookie of the Year. Angel Reese, congratulations.
I saw the biggest annoying thing the other day.
The biggest annoying thing.
Well, I was going to say something else.
Biggest.
It was like a couple weeks ago, it was ESPN. They said Angel Reese, I think you saw it, Angel Reese was the de facto Rookie of the Year.
There it is again.
And they were saying they're voting for Angel Reese.
Yeah.
And then literally a couple days later, there was
changing it.
A new rookie's on top of the Rookie of the Year.
It's Rakia Jackson.
No, it's like, obviously you're voting for Caitlyn, okay? I think they just changed it up so they could release another article
that get those
said
clicks, man.
It changed.
You gotta get those clicks.
Exactly. So no, it's gonna be Caitlyn.
Yeah, it's Caitlyn, with a bullet. Obviously, Angel got hurt.
Yeah.
Angel deserves all of the credit that she got.
Absolutely.
In that race. It was not just a Caitlyn race all year, especially with how they started.
Angel has a fire Sports Illustrated cover.
Oh yeah.
Look that up.
Yeah, check that out.
And Reese's Pieces merch.
Reese's Puffs.
Yep. She has a new podcast. True. Unapologetically Angel. Check it out.
Check that out. Kristen's listened. Yeah, no. Caitlyn.
Yeah.
For Rookie of the Year.
Okay.
Which leaves us with one final award, the Most Improved Player. We had a conversation about this earlier today. I believe it will be Dejanay Carrington of the Connecticut Sun, who is a player that did not start a single game last year. It's only started maybe a handful. I actually don't think she started a single game all year. And started 39 games for them and helped bolster their defense. Increased her scoring by 5 points. Showed an ability to steal at an above league average rate. An ability to get to the cup. Ability to score in the paint. Dejanay. And a great character in the league. In a league full of great characters, Dejanay is one of my favorites. So I believe she earned that in her helping Connecticut add another piece to an already good roster by growing into this starting role.
I definitely won't deny that. Dejanay, I think, has aura.
Oh, okay. It's the gold locks.
For sure. But I think there's room for debate for other players. I think one that stands out and that I've also seen is Kennedy Carter. She actually didn't play last year, but had previously played 2020 to 2022. So she has, older stats. In 2022, she started 2 games. And this year for the Sky, she started 20. She started the year not starting, but then I think, as players got hurt on the Sky, lots of players were hurt. Kennedy Carter easily fit in very well to their starting lineup. She went from 8 points per game in 22 to 17.5.
A big jump.
A huge jump this year.
Offensive assignment, primary offensive scorer for...
She went from, 1.9 rebounds to 3.5.
Yep.
That's a difference. She went from 1.9 assists to 3.5 assists. So she's just gotten better, literally in every single metric. And was leading the league in fast break points.
Yeah.
Like, she made a huge impact on the Sky.
Yeah.
And even though the Sky ended up not making the playoffs, they would have been out of it way earlier if Kennedy wasn't performing as well as she was.
It's kind of a shame because, Chicago falls into these bottom 4 spots because of the pick swap from the Marina Mabrey trade. They will not have a chance to get Paige. But, a offensive engine like Kennedy Carter plus Camilla's rebounding and defense and Angel's rebounding, if they just got a really good point guard, they could be so good. And Kennedy, I just said had a huge offensive responsibility for this team. So it makes sense. It shows in the numbers that she's increased by as much as she has. So I think it's worth considering her for the award as well. And I think this is what will make the most interesting race, is between either these two, or there's another player that we're not thinking of. Could Nafisa Collier, because she's had another jump, could she be considered? Probably not, because if they give her DPOY, then they're not spreading awards. But
I don't think they care, really.
I don't know. We will be witnessing these awards come out throughout the postseason. But love award time. We're thinking that once the whole season is wrapped up, that we're going to have our own award show with some other fun awards that we're going to come up with. If you have an idea for an award that you would like us to respond to, send us an email, attackthebaseline@gmail.com, or send us a shout on Twitter, ATBpod_. This has been a long one.
Yeah,
a lot to talk about.
A lot to preview for the next couple weeks. But stay tuned again for our Aces pod, also coming out in the next
day or two.
Yeah.
Yes. So get excited for that. I don't have anything else. Enjoy the WNBA playoffs. Get excited for whoever's going to take home that trophy. And then we'll look forward to 2025. But until then, Kristen, I'm looking at the baseline. What are we going to do? Attack it. That's right. Attack the baseline. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back with another pod right around the corner. But until then, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.